Jan and Pat. That's lovely. So good morning. Good morning. Thank you. I'm Suzanne Molnar, member of the worship committee, and I'm the worship associate for today. And when Carol said, "Are you available to do the equinox?" I said, oh yes, it's wonderful. Welcome to Westside Unitarian Universalist Church. We are a church that welcomes everybody who wants to join us in searching for meaning, in celebrating, in connecting with each other, and in attempting to be our best selves with each other and with the wider world. So welcome on this glorious morning as we celebrate the spring equinox, turning of seasons, the rebirth of so much. I was thinking about New Year because I'm going to read some Japanese haiku, and this is the time of year when they, like many other cultures, say, well, this is the new year. And that makes sense. So much is being born. And thinking about, well, ours is at the winter solstice, and that kind of makes sense too, although it can be pretty grim for a couple of months. But here we are, equinox. You couldn't have a prettier one. There are announcements in your order of service or streaming. I want to call your attention in particular to, well, several. The congregational meeting is next week. If you're not going to be here, please sign a proxy form and let somebody who will be here vote for you, because of course we have to have a quorum to pass anything. Earth Church, this afternoon at 2 o'clock. I would say our property is doing a wonderful job of making a setting for that. And a reminder, we no longer take plate, but we still need money, as does our Share the Plate community partner, Justice and Generosity partner, the Bottoms. So there's boxes at the back. You can physically donate, or you can do it with your, if you're, unlike me, if you're good at using the QR codes, you can do it that way. Oh, another announcement from Alice, that there won't be a poetry column this month, but it will resume next month. Any other announcements from anybody? No? Okay.
Actually, one.
You've got one. Okay.
Yes, I actually have one more announcement, which is that our Canvas campaign is April 6th. That's when we kick off our Canvas campaign. And we're having a party on April 6th, and we will be playing the connection game again. Some of you may remember the connection game. It's a game where we figure out whose secrets belong to which people. So in order to do that, we have to have some secrets about y'all to use for the game. So in this room on the back table, there are some sheets that are for the connection game where you can say, I met so-and-so on some, who was it? Last year, somebody was like, I met some famous person on an island in, the tropics. Or I've flown an airplane and you would never have known that about me. Things we wouldn't know about each other. So there are some forms in the back. This will also be online, so you will have the opportunity, but we need you to fill those forms out, and then there will be a game at the actual Canvas party, which will be pretty much during service time into coffee hour time, potluck time, the first Sunday in April. So please fill those out and give us some juicy stuff to work with for that game.
And speaking of juicy, there's also a sign up back there for the potluck that goes with this. Potluck, party, sign up what category of juicy stuff you're going to bring for us, okay? All right, yeah. Okay. All right. So Carol will invite the bowl to sound.
I'm here, I'm sneaking behind you. I snuck up behind her. So today we're talking about spring and all the different traditions around the world that celebrate spring. There are many. And the thing that we tend to, as Westerners, do with the spring equinox is we tend to think all about the future. Yay, it's getting brighter. Yay, it's getting lighter. Yay, it's all awesome. But that's not actually what the equinox is. The equinox is when dark and light are equal. We're not in summer yet. Spring is its own kind of magic. It would not be spring without the storms. So as the bowl sounds, I invite you to just sit for a moment with whatever image or thought or reflection comes up for you about the magic that is that mix of dark and light.
For chalice lighting, I have 3 Japanese haiku about spring. I picked this up when I was an undergraduate. I have no idea, no memory of why it appealed to me so much, but it still does. Okay. It is spring again. Gay in the garden gather sunbathing sparrows. It's by Onitura. And also from him, Silent Cherry Bloom. Again, with your old eloquence, address my inner ear. And finally, from Shika, or Shaika, my Japanese is, I can't say it's rusty, it's non-existent. Tremendous forces, stone-piled fence, all tumbled down by 2 cats in love. So. Okay. Let's do the other. Can you do the other one first?
Sure.
Okay.
So we typically, each week, light candles of the mixity that is life, joys and concerns. And so this week, our community candle, I would like to light our sorrowful, our concern community candle for the return of fighting in Gaza, the end of the ceasefire, because it's just a bummer. It's just a bummer. And those kinds of setbacks and steps backward are, they're disheartening. So let's keep that in our minds.
And for our candle of celebration, spring is a time when you see things coming back, reborn, recreated, and people maybe trying anew. Screw up, try to get it right next time. as will, I am sure, happen in Gaza. People will try again to get it right and probably screw up again. We keep going through the messing up and then the rebirth. People keep trying, and that's worth celebrating, I think.
Thanks, Suzanne. I love that. We persist. We don't give up. So today we're going to be talking about some various ways that we celebrate the spring equinox. And the choir, in just a minute, is going to sing a song for us that is, it comes from the earth-based traditions. It's not specifically focused on spring, but it is the kind of invocation that is used in earth-based traditions. So before we sing it, because I forgot to get it printed for you all in the order of service, I want to read the words to you so that you know what the words are. And then we'll talk about it a little bit. The words are Mother Earth, beloved garden, living treasure underfoot. All our days you ground our being, sage and thistle, grass and root. Herbs to heal us, plants to feed us, land to till and tend and plow. With the pendant deep as midnight, north we ask you, be here now. Notice as I'm reading this that the song invokes each of the 4 cardinal directions and things associated with them. Father Air, your inspiration holds together all that lives. As we breathe, our minds see clearly, leading us to love and give. Raging whirlwind, whispered breezes, violent gale and gentle cloud. With the blade as sharp as morning, east we ask you, be here now. Brother fire, great transformer, share the passion of the sun. In our hearths, your warmth revives us, cooks our food, heats our homes. Flaming candle, blood within us, blazing desert, will to grow. With the wand directing power, south we ask you, be here now. Sister water, ever-flowing, ocean, river, pond, and rain, drink we now and quench our thirsting. Cleanse us, we begin again. Mist and ice, a host of changes, all that courage will allow. With the cup, the holy chalice, west we ask you, be here now. Are we doing the 5th verse? Just the 4. Just the 4 verses. So sometimes in those invocations, there's also an invocation to a couple other things, depending on the tradition. But the cardinal directions are associated with elements and with seasons and with particular plants and things. So we're going to sing this invocation, and I just invite you to hear it, knowing that this is from the earth-based traditions. And then later on in a few minutes, we're going to talk about some of the other traditions and the things that they do to honor the seasons in the spring. So the choir's going to come up and we're going to sing Mother Earth, Beloved Garden. And the south and the west and the north. And they have associations with elements and seasons and plants and animals. Many earth-based traditions would have used such an invocation on Thursday, which was the spring equinox. And we will probably do one similar to that when we do our Earth Church this afternoon, our celebration of the equinox. That's at 2, by the way. Everybody's welcome. You do not have to be earth-based. If you're just super curious, you can show up. Okay. The spring holiday that most Westerners are familiar with, of course, is Easter. If you happen to be Jewish, it's Passover, but the one that our broader culture celebrates and sort of pushes. Anybody, the Cadbury Bunny tryout commercials are back. Have you seen them? The one with the lion and the pig and the... Okay, really seriously, some of you have got to have seen these, where there's a stage and they're auditioning for the Easter Bunny. Yeah. Okay. So that's the one our culture pushes. That is the spring tradition that we are most familiar with in our Western culture. And we will be celebrating that here. Now, this year Easter falls on April 20th. And when we do that celebration, we'll be singing some of the traditional Christian songs that are associated with the Christian holiday of Easter. But some of you might know that there's a strong connection between the equinox and Easter. One of the things we do here on Easter is not really a Christian celebration. It's more kind of a spring equinox celebration. On the 20th of April, we'll be doing our annual flower communion. Some of you will not have ever have heard of this if you haven't been here for very long. On our flower communion, what we do is we sit facing each other in a kind of a circle, and we have a table with vases, and everybody brings flowers. And everybody puts flowers in the vases as part of the service. And then you leave taking flowers that you did not bring. This is a symbolic representation. It's a ritual designed to symbolize that we bring gifts into the community and we receive gifts in the community that are different than the ones we bring in. So that ritual is one of our spring traditions. It's a Unitarian Universalist spring tradition. Most of us in the larger secular culture are familiar with things like Easter eggs and sweet treats and bunnies and things like that, right? The equinox itself is the origin of those traditions, and cultures around the world have similar traditions designed to talk about the things Suzanne was talking about: renewal, the flowers, inspiration, hope, possibility, the returning of the light, things like that. So, as I said before, the equinox is when darkness and light are equal. There are, of course, 2 of them in the year. So for people who sort of follow an earth-based calendar that is based around the movements of the sun and to some extent the moon. Most religious traditions that we are familiar with in the world, most of what we call the major religions, center their schedule, in us theologians call that their liturgical calendar. Their schedule is based on somebody's life, or the stories of somebody's life. So the way that Buddhism is centered is on the teachings of the Buddha. The way that Christianity is centered is on the story of the life of Jesus of Nazareth, right? The sort of chronology, or the way that Islam is structured, is on the life of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. So there are these schedules. How would congregations or groups know what to talk about, right? There's got to be a central story. In earth-based traditions, the central story is the cycle of the seasons. And so in that cycle, you have 2 solstices, one at the winter solstice, December 20th, 21st, one at the summer solstice, June 20th-ish. And the things in between them are the equinoxes, March 20th and September 20th. They're equidistant from each other. So, in fact, many of the other traditions in those other religions are based on the solar traditions, just adapted and adopted. So the equinox is when the sunlight and daylight length are the same as the sunlight lengthens during the year. And a number of ancient sites are aligned so we know that ancient cultures celebrated these particular times of year. Anybody know about Chichen Itza? You familiar with Chichen Itza? So anybody know about the steps in the temple at Chichen Itza? The steps of the main temple at Chichen Itza on the spring equinox, the steps are designed to create the pattern of a serpent actually moving on the steps on the equinox. That took some planning. And it took a lot of people a lot of time to build that. Literally, I think the serpent descends down the steps on the equinox. As the light hits it, the serpent, through the course of the equinox day, the shadows of the steps cause the serpent to undulate down the steps. Major feat of human engineering. So clearly, ancient people, there are many, many other sites. Clearly, ancient people thought that we should pay attention to these days, that they were somehow important. Have any of you ever heard of the Russell-McFerrin effect? I didn't think so, because I just learned about it this week. It's fascinating. And we just experienced, well, we're kind of still experiencing it. It's happening right now. Okay? So anybody else heard the phrase equinox cracks? Okay, this is your cool science thing to go look up when you get home today. So here's the deal. Equinox cracks is an inaccurate but catchy name for this effect that happens on the equinoxes. This is fascinating. I'm going to explain it to you. This is a summary from like a website that's like science dumbed down for non-scientists. The Russell-McFerrin effect explains the increased occurrence of auroras during the equinoxes in March and September. First described in 1973 by geophysicist Christopher Russell and Robert McFerrin, it occurs when the Earth's magnetic field aligns more closely with the solar wind, a stream of charged particles emitted by the sun. This alignment allows more particles to enter Earth's magnetosphere, leading to the vibrant auroral displays we see in the sky at the equinoxes. Now, we don't live where they're very visible, but apparently, spring equinox and fall equinox is wild aurora time, aurora borealis and aurora australis. So right now, we are having the spring equinox, but in the southern hemisphere, they're having their fall equinox. Doesn't matter, the auroras still get totally amped up. Though many people on the Earth cannot see the increased auroras that occur during these equinoxes, they are apparently a big thing that scientists love and study. And of course, ancient peoples would have seen them if they lived close enough to those places, and probably heard about them even if they didn't. Now, some more mystical-oriented people argue that humans might in some way be able to feel or be impacted by these changes in particles entering our atmosphere, which we don't have to argue about. It's just cool that it happens. And here's how it works. Again, from our website that was good for me. During most of the year, the Earth's magnetic field and the solar wind are misaligned. They aren't in perfect alignment. However, around the equinoxes, these fields line up but point in opposite directions, creating a perfect gateway for solar particles to interact with our atmosphere. Right? So the magnetosphere is pointed away, and the solar wind is pointed right at us. And so we get these heightened activities. The interaction excites oxygen and nitrogen molecules, causing them to emit light in vivid colors, creating the auroras. So in fact, the equinoxes there's something happening. That's kind of cool. I had no clue about that until this week. I thought that was fascinating. But even without that sort of cosmic cool impact of equinoxes, the simple change of seasons is, of course, enough to excite reflection and celebration and all kinds of things in humans, because we love to make meaning, right? And most world traditions, both religious traditions and just cultural or regional traditions, do in fact make some kind of nod to the spring equinox. We consider it important in one way or another. And as we were saying earlier, earth-based traditions, neo-pagan traditions, they're sort of an amalgamation of older traditions. They call it Ostara. Does that sound familiar to anybody? Ostara. Ostara is a Germanic goddess who is said to have brought the spring. And actually another name for her is Ostara. Does that sound like any other holiday name you recognize? Easter. It's spelled E-O-S-T-R-E, Eastra, Easter. And the name is actually is the same root as estrus. It means fertility, which is why in our secular Easter celebrations, we have bunnies and eggs, because they're associated with fertility and spring, and they were associated with the pagan goddesses in those cultures, and they're associated with our contemporary celebrations. Now, here's where other traditions come in. In 325 CE, in the Common Era, the Council of Nicaea, which was the group of people that, for the Catholic Church, agreed upon sort of the basics of the religion, they established a formula for figuring out the date of Easter. Okay? Easter is what we call a movable feast. And doesn't everybody have that thing in your home somewhere in the late winter where you're like, when's Easter this year? Is it in March? Is it in April? Like, when's it happening? Right? That's a movable feast. The actual calendric date changes. And this is why. Because there's complex math involving the spring equinox and the full moon to determine when Easter happens. So, Easter, this is the calculation of the Council of Nicaea set in place. Easter falls on the Sunday following the Paschal full moon, which is the full moon that falls on or after the spring equinox. Okay, so you got both solar and lunar impacts there. You got to know when the spring equinox is, and then you got to find the full moon that falls either on that day or right after that day, and then the Sunday after that is when Easter happens. Okay? There are more complications because the Catholic Church has its own calendar of determining the Paschal full moon. That's separate. But so this year, so the spring equinox happened last Thursday on March 20th, but there was a full moon right before it. So the next full moon, which will be the Paschal full moon, is on April 12th, which happens to be a Saturday night, which means that you can't have Easter on the 13th because it's too close. You have to go to the Sunday after that to make it Easter. So that's April 20th. Voila. Right? Isn't that fascinating? It's kind of ridiculous, but it's fun, right? So what we see in that is the amalgamation of traditions, which is how a lot of religious and cultural traditions are established. They are amalgamated or syncretized. So the date for Easter itself is, in fact, a solar and lunar date. Now, in Hindu tradition, the holiday that's celebrated around the spring equinox is often called the Festival of Colors, or Holi. Anybody ever seen the cool pictures of the festivals in India where they're like running in the streets and throwing powdered paint at each other? There's huge festivals where people are throwing paint, or sometimes water, like colored water at each other. That is another celebration with its own whole religious culture behind it. Particular goddesses are associated with that to celebrate the equinox. And again, we get the bright colors. The colors of the powdered paint at Holi are the same as the colored eggs that we have in our Easter traditions. How many of you know what Baha'i is? Baha'i is a faith tradition that has its own whole, we don't know much about it. I don't know much about it. It's a smaller tradition. It is a tradition that celebrates world unity and the connections of all people. And it's got a very particular holiday that's celebrated at the spring equinox. So they celebrate a holiday called Nowruz. Okay? And it is, in fact, their new year. One of the things Suzanne was saying is that for some traditions, this is New Year. Spring is New Year. It's interesting that you can find New Year's traditions in the fall, in the winter, and in the spring. There are New Year's traditions, earth-based. Many pagan people celebrate New Year's at Halloween. Some people, Western culture celebrates New Year's at the winter solstice. And in Baha'i, this is New Year. Nowruz, right? It means the new day, the new time. This holiday is rooted in Zoroastrianism. Anybody know what Zoroastrianism is? It goes way back. Our most famous figures that are probably Zoroastrian characters in the history we study is the three kings in the story of Jesus' birth. They were probably Zoroastrians. So Zoroastrianism is this really old tradition, and it's very numerical and got a lot of solar and lunar connections. So Baha'i has kind of got some roots in that. They count Nowruz, the spring equinox, as one of 11 holy days. And they spend this holiday commemorating the symbolic notion of the renewal of time, like everything gets reborn, like the universe gets reborn. This day was, in their tradition, ordained by Baha'u'llah, which is their primary figure, whose name I just pronounced terribly. They consider it the springtime of humanity. So in all of these traditions, Christian, pagan, Hindu, Baha'i, in Japanese culture, and all these different cultures, surely many others that we don't even know about, we mark the spring equinox as a time of practical renewal, like it's getting warmer and it's nicer and we can plant things. But it's also about spiritual renewal. We associate it with color and life and warmth and vitality. But as I said a few minutes ago, it's kind of important to remember that the equinox is not summer. Spring is not summer. It's a time of rebirth and a time of renewal. But it's not all about the light and the birth and the renewal, because without the dark and the death and the sadness, you couldn't have those things, right? The autumnal or fall equinox in the southern hemisphere right now and the vernal or spring equinox in the north right now are pivot points. We are moving towards light, but still in some darkness. As I was looking at information about this season, there was a poem that caught my attention that comes from the Christian tradition. It's poet Gerard Manly Hopkins' poem Spring, and it kind of captures this. It kind of captures the necessity of light and darkness operating together. So I'm going to read Hopkins' poem and then talk about it for a minute. Nothing is so beautiful as spring, when weeds in wheels shoot long and lovely and lush. Thrush's eggs look little low heavens, and thrush through the echoing timber does so rinse and ring the ear. It strikes like lightnings to hear him sing. The glassy pear tree leaves and blooms, they brush the descending blue. That blue is all in a rush with richness. The racing lambs, too, have fair their fling. What is all this juice and joy? A strain of the earth's sweet being in the beginning, in Eden's garden. Get before it cloy, before it cloud. Christ, Lord, and sour with sinning, innocent mind and Mayday and girl and boy most. O maid's child, thy choice and worthy the winning. So we're not going to spend time to explicate the whole meaning of that poem, because it's very complex. But there's some important images there. I mean, let me just ask you, what words caught your attention when I read it out loud? Just a word or two. Rush. Huh? Did anybody catch sinning and sour? Sour with sinning? The first stanza is lovely and exactly what we expect for spring. Beautiful blue sky, bird song, plants growing, little eggs, little lambs dancing across the fields. But the second stanza is a little more complicated, a little bit harder to explain. It is a reflection from a devout Christian perspective on the meaning of the season, which for Christians includes the sacrifice of Jesus and his gift of salvation, right? And of course, the whole poem is rich with Christian imagery. For example, in the Christian tradition, the blue sky, does anybody know who the blue of the sky and the blue sky is associated with? Mary, mother of Jesus. So when we talk about the blue sky in Christian poetry, we are talking about Jesus' mother. Okay? So the imagery is there, but notice the echoes of dark and light there, right? The light has come. It's beautiful. It's springy. But there's a strain of earth's sweet being in the beginning of Eden. What happened to Eden? Things didn't go well for humans in Eden, right? There was a problem in that story, right? Sour with sinning. So the phrases that caught my attention, first phrase that caught my attention is, what is all this juice and all this joy? Because don't we love that part? We love all the juice and all the joy. And we're mad when the thunderstorms and the tornadoes come. But isn't that also spring? Spring isn't spring if it doesn't have stormy weather. We like to think about Easter and the coming of warmer days, and then we get kind of annoyed that it's not perfect every day. The poem, to put a point on it, contrasts the beauty and vitality of life in spring with the death and decay of the world that is also part of the world. Right? That, to me, feels a lot like the equinox. Regardless of which of the many philosophical or religious traditions we personally adhere to, any of those traditions, they remind us that spring is a mix of light and dark. We are moving towards more light and more warmth, but we only notice it because we're moving out of darkness and cold. Without the darkness, there's not a story to tell. The magic of spring is not the magic of summer. Spring is something entirely different from that. And sometimes I think we focus exclusively on how spring is getting us to summer. Hurry up, darn it. Right? But it might be worthwhile to pause for a moment and simply appreciate the contrast. Ellen talked about this last week. Life is a mix of joy and sorrow, of dark and light, of challenge and celebration. This contrast is part of what makes it beautiful. In the time of the equinox, we are called to remember that all the juice and all the joy can only be seen clearly in contrast with harder times. The thing that Suzanne was saying about the persistence, the determination, the continuing, the trying again, right? Well, we don't need those qualities if everything's always perfect. Often we have a tendency to want to wish away all the challenges, but they are, in many ways, a gift. Anybody ever think to yourself, oh, the air smells so good after a thunderstorm? Oh, it's so clean and clear. Boy, that was a scary thunderstorm, but wow, it's really nice after it. Maybe here's a message we might consider taking away from this. As we celebrate the arrival of spring, Perhaps we can apply its hopefulness, its sense of rebirth, to things that are not yet out of darkness. Maybe instead of constantly wanting to be in spring, in summer actually, we can hold that thought of spring as the pivot point, as the transition, as the possibility in the face of darkness. That's what we like about it. It is the possibility of light in the face of darkness that Spring Equinox highlights for us. So my fruit trees on the farm are starting to show signs of spring. Some of them are flowering. But they're not going to produce fruit this year. They're too young for that. It's not time. They need another spring, or maybe two, before any of their juice and joy is going to show up at my table. But I'm going to tend to them anyway, knowing that my efforts will likely, not certain, it's not guaranteed, there's no certainty, but likely, if I am able to persist with the darkness, with the not fruiting, with it taking longer, eventually, when the time is ripe, they may fruit. I know that light and darkness always dance together. Even at the peak of summer, autumn is just a moment away. Perhaps I can hold on, and we can hold on, in the face of darkness, that hope, that pivot is always possible. There will be more tornadoes. I am now speaking metaphorically. Please apply this in whatever direction makes sense to you, because there are going to be more tornadoes. There are going to be more storms. There are things that are not yet ripe to produce juice and joy. There are things that remain dark. The point of spring is not that things will always be all light all the time. Isn't that great? The point of spring is that the pivot is always possible. The mixity of spring is its magic. The constant contrast between light and dark. The days that hit 70 degrees and then a few days later only make it to 40. These things are bonded together. And so for us, what I'd like to encourage us to do is remember that spring is meant to remind us to hold that energy, that feeling, that possibility of the pivot, especially when it's dark. Especially when the storms are coming, especially when things are challenging. That's the point of the equinox, the recognition that the two live together and that things are always changing and moving. So I would encourage you to just hold that possibility in your heart. It's beautiful outside today. There's a really good chance there's going to be at least one more tornado-y day between now and summer. Really good, especially with climate change, right? There's a really good chance. But I can remember that feeling of possibility, of the pivot, of the way it feels after the storm is over. So I want to invite you as you go into your day, into your week. You're watching the news. You're dealing with your life. You're dealing with the prices at the grocery store, whatever it is. Spring. Spring is always possible. Now, we can help make it better. We have opportunities. So Suzanne mentioned justice and generosity. There are ways that we can do things to help bring that energy of spring into our world. There are always financial opportunities. There are also ways we can act. There's, I think, the tree planting. Let's see what the tree planting thing is. Tennessee Tree Day is this week. Okay, it's at the end of the week. The last few days of this week, they're going to need help planting trees. That is something you could do. We are also still looking for help to coordinate our Family Promise program. No, was Elizabeth, raise your hand. So Elizabeth works hard, but she needs help. So we have our upcoming Family Promise at the end of April. We do need people to sign up to actually show up. We made a promise that we'd have some people spend the night, and we also made a promise that we'd provide some food. So we really need help with that. And Elizabeth also needs some help coordinating the fall Family Promise event. So if you are able or interested, please talk to her about that. Elizabeth also asked me to raise another question for all of you. We have a quilt. We are in the process, some of you will have seen, we are spring cleaning our building. Things are moving around. We're removing some things. There is a quilt that is available. We are no longer hanging it in one of our rooms. It's a quilt that was in our children's room, has a picture of the earth and children holding hands. And we're wondering if you know anything about the origin of that quilt, who made it, or where we might relocate it to, someone who might like it back, or someone we might want to give it to, or someplace we can donate it. Please also talk to Elizabeth. Anything else that anybody's got, any other spring projects you want us to know about that are out there for us to work on? We will be shifting in the month of April from our current Justice and Generosity partner is the bottom. That will change at the start of April, and we will shift to our spring project, which is LGBTQIA plus justice, and our partner in the spring quarter will be Knox Pride. So you can look for things coming up in coming months about that. All right, we're going to sing one more time. The choir is going to sing a chant for the season that's about spring. And what I'd like to invite you to notice about it is it's not peppy cheery. It's actually kind of dissonant and kind of in a minor key. So it recognizes, we're going to sing the verse. This is for all 4 seasons. We're just going to sing the spring verse. But this is a reminder that spring is beautiful, and there's a little bit of still that contrast in it. So the choir is going to come up. We're going to sing that. I love the way that ends on that sort of melancholy note. Springtime is upon us, right? That's how it feels when the tornado warnings are happening, right? So I would like to invite you to stand, if you are willing and able, for our closing. Springtime also comes with colds and flus. Hold your own hands if you do not want to hold someone else's. Hold hands with another person if you like, and hold your own hands if you just, that's all really okay. It is really okay. So I invite you, as we stand here together, to call to mind the darkest thing you can think of in your world right now. Maybe that's the political situation. Maybe that's a personal challenge. Maybe that's an illness or a diagnosis. Maybe that's someone you love who's struggling. Maybe that is an environmental issue. Maybe it's something like a home that you don't know you're going to be able to keep, or a financial challenge. Or maybe it's just a relationship that's not going where you thought it should. Call to mind the darkest thing in your life right now. And imagine a spring wind blowing through that. Spring winds bring change. They bring transformation. They're pivot points. Imagine the possibility that you don't know how, you don't know when, but just maybe something will move through that darkness. We do not control everything, but we can be sure that things will change. So hold in your hearts as you go into your day and your week the possibility that the winds might bring change for good. Go in peace, go in passion, go in hope. Happy spring, everybody.
Okay.
And nothing else for the whole service.